Hello everybody and welcome to this very first devlog and to the channel. My name is Benjamin and 2 years ago my good buddy Maureen and we decided that we wanted to become indie game devs. Now, we had no experience with game development or game engines whatsoever, but somewhere along the lines we decided that we want to do it anyway. And soon after starting development on our very first indie game, we even founded our own company called Playground Pigeon. And our first game, The Wake, has been in the making for a little over 2 years now. We have finally mustered up the courage to share our progress and our journey with you guys. Our game, The Wake, is a Lovecraftian fishing shooter where you get to explore dangerous islands and waters. You have to carefully manage your fishing equipment to hunt down outlandish fish species that live in these ecosystems. You then battle the fish in an epic boss fight, and if you manage to take your catch back to camp, you can strip them of their parts to craft and upgrade unique weapons. These in turn help you to survive the onslaught of ferocious sea monsters lurking in the sea, trying to rip your boat apart. Use the essence of your fallen enemies to discover and harness the eldritch magic in this old and forsaken place of the world. Okay, now that is the premise anyway, but first things first, how did we even start out with any of this? And you are probably wondering, how the hell did the government give us 100k to make this game? Brace yourselves for a rather unusual game dev journey. And as a disclaimer for all the hardened game devs among you, try not to bite your keyboard, because we made some stupid decisions. We have little experience and we just do things our own way. And so far it all works out, but if you do have any helpful tips you want to share, we are always grateful for that. Okay, then let's get started. In the summer of 2022, Maureen and I were out fishing, some beers were involved, and we suddenly came up with the idea of our own little video game. Of course, it was all just fun and games at first, but the topic came up more and more when we saw each other, and we started adding things until it felt like a really solid framework. At some point, we asked ourselves, what if we really did that? Founding our own little studio and making a game together. But yeah, we had no experience and no money, so it couldn't possibly work out, we thought to ourselves. Where would we even begin? COVID was still around back then and work was extremely slow, so we had time on our hands and nothing to lose really. So we just gave it a shot. And lucky for us, we live in Cologne, Germany, and they have really cool programs for startups here. We applied for a so-called founders sponsorship, and we had to do a business plan and a well laid out concept, but they granted us some money to last us for roughly 1 year. And to be precise, it was 1,000 euros a month that they gave us. Not really enough to live off here in Cologne, but it would allow us to work full-time on the game without starving. So we went ahead and refined the concepts we had previously established together. We love fishing and we love shooting games. And we have a mutual interest in eldritch horrors from outer space. So we went ahead, threw them all together and came up with a game idea. The gameplay was going to rest on 3 pillars. First, explore an ominous forgotten island chain and uncover the eldritch secrets of the outer god dormant below the land and of the people who once lived on these islands. Gather cool stuff while exploring to upgrade and enhance your equipment. Second, traverse dark and dangerous waters with a boat and fight for your life against eldritch creatures that lurk in the abyss. And the third, fishing. Catch the twisted and mutated fish that inhabit the waters of the islands. This one was the most challenging, since we wanted to make a cool and unique fishing mechanic that goes beyond the mini-game characteristics you can find in basically every game these days, but without the super realistic and mostly boring gameplay of fishing simulators. Now, hold on, the more experienced fellas among you will say, that is too ambitious for someone without experience or funding. Start small, make a simple platformer, for example. And you're probably right, but we didn't want that. We wanted to go big or go home. And sure, it was risky, it still is in fact. And to be completely honest with you, I think about the possibility of failure basically all the time. But we were telling ourselves we would go down in style at least should the game bomb in the end. But of course we were not delusional, and we knew a project of that size, it needs more money and also people. So we then applied for one of the best sponsorships we have here in Germany, and it was with the Movie and Media Foundation. And if things would go right, they would fund us with 80,000 euros. And together with the founder sponsorship we had received previously, it was enough to hire someone to help with the big stuff. So we had to really convince these people our game idea was solid. We couldn't program anything yet, and what were we gonna do? So we said, fuck it, fake it till you make it. If you don't have any screenshots, then make concept art that looks as convincing as screenshots would. And I graduated in illustration and Maureen in communications design. So this was our strong suit. We went ahead and created concept arts that would illustrate the different aspects of our game. So first I came up with the enemy types, since the combat was sort of the bread and butter of our game to be. The part that tickles the goblin brain, so to speak. And that's why the enemies needed to be distinct and different from one another, each filling a different role in the game. So then I decided there would be grunts, like the brute, I called him, that swim up to your boat to tear it apart. They are swarming enemies, they take some hits, but have no further notable skill. Then there are caster type enemies, the Icker, who shoots at you from a safe distance. The whirligig surfaces in random places in the arena and creates worlds that pull the player and his boat in, making it harder to maneuver. By having such different kinds of enemies, we wanted to encourage strategical thinking and target priority. You want to get rid of the whirligig, or like a buffing enemy type, ASAP before they turn the tides on you. The enemies were supposed to be Lovecraftian and scary, but we wanted to opt for a stylized look for the game, since this seemed the most achievable for a team of 2. So that needed to be reflected in the concept arts as well. You can't find off monsters without some proper guns, of course, so that was next on the agenda. Your character is supposed to be stranded on the island, so the guns would be self-made, makeshift kinda. Still, we wanted them to be experimental and unique, like in the Fallout universe, for example. The eldritch powers from the Outer God manifest on the island in form of magic and these power crystals, you could call them. They are used to power and enhance the weapons. We opted for different weapon types that would complement each other, but each excel in a different kind of situation. Some would be for focus damage if an enemy needs to die quickly, and some are for clearing large groups and so on. I will talk about them in detail in future episodes. For the design, we tried planning ahead, since we wanted to have a good amount of weapon upgrades, and the weapons were meant to change appearance with each new upgrade, so we tried to add parts that also reflect the upgrades we had in our head by then. So far so good, but fancy concept arts of monsters and guns alone would not convince the jury, we thought. What would the game ultimately look like? And what about the gameplay? To fake those, or let me say demonstrate them, we actually had to make an environment. Not in an engine yet. Learning that at this point would have taken too much time, since we had a deadline for the application. So we stuck to what we knew, Blender. Because of our design degree, we had some previous experience with the program. We had to decide on the art style. So like I said, stylized, but that can mean anything really. Maureen and I both loved the game Ashen, and we also spent a ton of hours in the game Islanders. They inspired us and we wanted to give them kind of a dark spin. It also seemed like an art style that was achievable enough for two rookies. We spent a lot of time making rocks in Blender, a plethora of them really, and we planned ahead, sort of, because we wanted to make them somewhat modular, so we could make different islands from the individual parts later. And we finally ended up with this. It did look alright so far, a bit rough around the edges maybe, but there was a lot missing still, and the lighting was also pretty flat. I wanted to really illustrate the feeling of the game to be the atmosphere, the gloom, the isolation, so we needed more details. I had envisioned some stranded on the main island, a settlement that would serve as a hub for the players, so to speak. They would trade with you, help with upgrades, and provide quests and lore. So we had to model some houses they would live in, and more props to bring that little village to life. And when that was done, we added trees. They were assets I really liked this time around, and it was coming together nicely. But the texture still seemed too flat to me. It fit a friendlier game like Islanders that served as like an inspiration for our process, and it also inspired our poly count for sure, but it felt like it was mismatched for a darker theme that we were going for. So we needed something in between detailed textures and a flat one like we had at the moment. So I went ahead and I tried out lots and lots of textures until I stumbled across this tutorial on YouTube, which was showing a process for Ghibli-style textures. And when I tried it out myself, I deemed it perfect for our style and made some textures for broader asset categories that we could easily modify to fit several different models. And a few days and weeks went by, and finally we created all of this in Blender. We rendered it, and after working my Photoshop magic, we ended up with this screenshot of the main island. Maureen had in the meantime been designing a neat logo for our game, so we were pretty good by then. The assets I made could then be used to demonstrate the fighting and the fishing, a screenshot for each. Another day in Blender and I had made this for the combat shot. Of course, we had no enemy models yet, and there was no way we would be able to convincingly model them anytime soon. So I went ahead and used some models I found on Sketchfab to make a mock-up with, and this was the result. So things were coming along nicely, but it was at this point that we suffered a severe backlash. I still remember being hard at work when a friend dropped me a message to check out this game that had just been announced, Dredge by Black Salt Games. We were devastated, to say the least. It had some Lovecraftian topics, it was about fishing, you were driving your ship across the ocean, around some island chains, so we were screwed, we thought. They did everything we were trying to achieve, and it even looked better than our game at this point. So we had a little break and a crisis meeting together. We analyzed the trailers and the gameplay footage that had come out by then, and luckily after a brief analysis we were able to tell that it was very similar in some aspects, but we still had major differences. The fishing in Dredge luckily was still a mini-game and there was no fighting either. So in hindsight, I'm really glad we did not give up at this point, that we kept on pushing, because Dredge sold immensely well. The critics and the players, they loved it. When it came out, we played it as well. And for us, it was a proof of concept. Like, there was a market for these types of games. And we could build upon that. And so that is what we did. We looked at what made Dredge great, what did people love about it, but we also had the chance to analyze what was great about this game, what did we love, what did people love about it, but also what could be improved, what didn't we like, what would we like to see in a game like this. And so this was a chance for us to incorporate all these things that Dredge was lacking into our game. For us, this meant going back to the application. The fishing shot proved to be a bit more difficult than what we previously did, because before we could showcase it, we would actually have to come up with our super special and innovative fishing mechanic we wanted to go for. So what we did is we brainstormed over some craft beers, multiple sessions in fact, and tried to come up with something. It was supposed to mimic the feeling you had when actually out fishing. It should be a fight between you and the fish, adrenaline pumping, a test of skill and persistence. Now, we were both very much into World of Warcraft growing up, and especially the raids. In gaming, for me at least, nothing ever came close to fighting a raid boss in World of Warcraft. Learning its mechanics, pushing your damage numbers, and finally besting it in the end. And afterwards, of course, the sweet rewards, the much expected loot you had been going for weeks. So we figured fishing could kinda be similar to it. A fishing boss fight, both parties trying to outmaneuver each other, throwing attacks at one another until one of them is defeated. So we decided this would be our gameplay loop for the fishing. We set it up similar to a World of Warcraft raid boss. A health bar for the fish that needed to be drained in order to catch it. It would cast attacks at you that needed to be interrupted or avoided. The countless boss encounters in World of Warcraft gave me all sorts of ideas for attacks the fish could be throwing at you. The player in turn would have a set of skills, like RPG style, that had individual effects, damage, and also cooldowns. This would allow for certain rotation that could be perfected and built upon. Buffs and debuffs would also come into play to spice things up a little. With all these mechanics in mind, we designed the arena in Blender, rendered it, and put it all together in Photoshop again. This was the screenshot we came up with in the end. Now, of course, the concepts and mechanics would drastically change along the way, but for now, this was good enough for the application. There was also a lot more we included in it. We made some extra shots to set the mood for the exploration. There was a quest system, magic powers, and their upgrade tree. We had a shaman and his system, and even a small teaser trailer we made. Now, some of these systems didn't make it to our current version of the game, but those that were implemented we will of course discuss in future videos. There was lots and lots of paperwork again, changing our company's legal form, a refined business plan, and we also made a website. But we finally sent out the application to the foundation, and then we waited for a long time. 3 long months, in fact, in which we continued our work, but we were on the edge of our seats, of course, a little more each day, until we finally got that letter in the mail. And yeah, they said they were going to fund us. 2 idiots who had never made a game before with an utopian game idea. And yeah, they were in fact skeptical about our capabilities of bringing that game to life. They were pretty transparent about that, and our lack of experience with engines also worried them, but they found the idea and the mechanics we came up with very intriguing, so they decided to give us the money in the end. And after a brief celebration between me and Maureen and all our friends who accompanied us along the way, shit got real. The idea of our game started getting real. It was not only a dream anymore, it was a possibility now. It was almost within reach. And that's when we began learning to use game engines finally. which is, I think, a good point to call it for now. I would have loved to go more into detail about us, who we are, our backgrounds, and so on, but I felt like this would exceed the limits of what I wanted this first video to be. But if you would like to hear a bit more about that, feel free to drop us a comment below. And I am very excited to share our next steps with you. And we already have the next few videos in the pipeline, in fact, since, of course, this is all in retrospect. So in the next vlog, we will show you our beginnings in game engines and how we handled things as, rookie indie devs, basically. We really hope you liked this little insight into our project and that you find our game and the ideas intriguing. We have also launched a Discord server by now, since we heard that's what good indie devs do, and it would mean a lot to us if you would stop by and maybe become part of this community. We invite you to make this journey together with us. And there is still a bit of road ahead, and you have the opportunity to shape this game with us. Maybe even have your own ideas incorporated. And if you are a dev yourself, maybe you even have some tips how to improve some of our code, our shaders, or to solve a problem we maybe just can't figure out. But either way, we are so grateful to have you here. Thank you for your time and for your attention. We hope to see you again in the next episode. Take care and follow your dreams.